Part 1. Cuius Regio, Ius Religio. In 1517, Martin Luther began the Protestant Reformation, challenging the power and wealth of the Roman Catholic Church. He said the Bible had more authority than the Pope, and that everyone should read and understand it for themselves. He spoke against corrupt practices like selling indulgences. Luther taught that faith in God alone brought salvation, instead of the Catholic belief that it required both faith and good deeds. Many princes in the Holy Roman Empire supported his ideas, called Lutheranism. While many embraced Luther's message, some rulers stayed loyal to the Pope, especially the powerful Habsburg dynasty. The Spanish Habsburgs controlled Spain, much of Italy, and the Netherlands, not to mention a large colonial empire in the Americas and Asia. The Austrian Habsburgs ruled Austria, Bohemia, and Hungary, and had held the title of Holy Roman Emperor for generations. To stop the spread of Protestantism, the Catholic Church held the Council of Trent from 1545 to 1563. It confirmed Catholic teachings, addressed abuses, and encouraged the use of art, music, and tradition to inspire faith in God. This Counter-Reformation made Europe's religious divisions even sharper. Europe's new confessional landscape soon became more diverse with the ideas of John Calvin, a French lawyer turned theologian in Geneva. Calvin taught a strict, disciplined way of life, unlike Luther, who preached freedom. His Reformed Protestantism spread in France, the Netherlands, and Scotland, starting in the 1560s. Calvin also promoted the idea of predestination, the belief that God had already chosen who would be saved. The stark differences between Lutheranism and Catholicism inevitably led to harsh disagreement and conflict between the two faiths, especially in the Holy Roman Empire. Emperor Charles V tried to crush Lutheranism while it was young, but many princes, such as the Elector of Saxony, pushed back. Because Charles V spent much of his time away from imperial affairs, Protestantism spread quickly. In 1531, Lutheran princes formed the Schmalkaldic League to defend their beliefs. Poor leadership and betrayal weakened them, and when a war broke out in 1546, Charles V defeated them easily. The League returned in 1552 with French help and beat Charles. This led to the 1555 Peace of Augsburg. It allowed a policy of Cuius Regio, Ius Religio, whose realm is religion, in the Holy Roman Empire, where each imperial prince could choose the religion, Lutheran or Catholic, for their land and people. This peace allowed Protestants to stay, but excluded Reformed Protestants. Although this peace reduced tensions in the empire, conflict grew elsewhere. In France, Catholics and Reformed Protestants fought over control of the government, starting the French Wars of Religion in 1562. In the Spanish Netherlands, many Reformed Protestants faced harsh persecution under Catholic Spanish rule. In 1572, they began their revolt against Spain. Fortunately for France, they ended their religious wars in 1598, when King Henry IV allowed religious toleration for Protestants. The Dutch, however, saw the struggle continue for decades, as the war with Spain dragged on without a quick resolution. The Peace of Augsburg also said that Catholic lands taken before 1552 could stay Protestant, but no more land could be taken. Protestants often ignored this and kept seizing Catholic property anyways. In 1582, Gebhard Trotsches, the Archbishop of Cologne, fell in love with a nun, married her, and became a Reformed Protestant. This shocked Catholics and Lutherans, partly because Cologne was one of the 7 electorates that chose the Holy Roman Emperor. Spain worried too, as Cologne was a key stop on the Spanish Road, a military supply route for its war in the Netherlands. Duke Albrecht V of Bavaria pushed to give the archbishopric to his son Ernst. With Spanish troops and Catholic allies, Ernst defeated Trotsches and restored Catholicism in the region by 1558. Another flashpoint came in 1605, when Donauwörth's city council blocked a Catholic procession. In 1606, Catholics marched anyways, and riots broke out. Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II let Duke Maximilian I of Bavaria occupy and pacify the city. This raised doubts about whether the Peace of Augsburg still worked, now that princes could force their faith on others. In 1608, leaders met at a Reichstag to fix the issue. Rudolf's cousin, Archduke Ferdinand, said it would only happen if Protestants returned all Catholic land taken since 1552. Some Protestants walked out in protest, and talks collapsed. That same year, Frederick IV, the Elector Palatine of the Rhine, formed the Protestant Union with the other southern German states like Ansbach and Württemberg to defend their religion. In 1609, Catholic leaders formed the Catholic League, led by Maximilian I and the Elector Archbishop of Mainz. Both groups claimed to defend their faith in the empire, but also aimed to grow the dynastic power of the leaders. In March 1609, John William, the Duke of Jülich, Cleves and Berg, died without an heir. His lands were large, rich, and sat between the Dutch Republic, Spain, and France. 2 Lutheran princes, John Sigismund, the Elector of Brandenburg, and Wolfgang Wilhelm, the Count Palatine of Neuburg, both wanted them. Emperor Rudolf II also wanted the land, but delayed making a decision. In June, Sigismund and Wolfgang signed the Treaty of Dortmund, agreeing to work together. Foreign powers watched closely, especially as Spain and the Dutch Republic had just signed the 12 Years' Truce, and France wanted to stop either side from gaining too much. King Henry IV built a large army to force a peace, but he was assassinated in May 1610. The Habsburgs sent Archduke Leopold V to intervene, which the Protestant Union blocked. By summer 1610, Sigismund and Wolfgang besieged Jülich. France and the Dutch joined late to save face, and the city surrendered on September 1st. Most troops left soon after, and by the end of 1610, both Protestant and Catholic forces had withdrawn. Tensions rose again when Sigismund became a Reformed Protestant in 1613, and Wolfgang secretly became a Catholic, marrying Maximilian's sister. In 1614, the new Holy Roman Emperor, Matthias, sent the Spanish commander Ambrosio Spinola with 21,000 troops. Spinola destroyed Mülheim's walls and took Wesel. The Treaty of Xanten in November 1614 gave Jülich and Berg to Wolfgang, and Cleves, Mark, and Ravensburg to Sigismund. Trust between Catholics and Protestants in the empire were now at an all-time low. Emperor Matthias' cousin, Archduke Ferdinand of Styria, wanted to be the next Holy Roman Emperor. Ferdinand was raised as a strict Catholic by Jesuits. As governor of Inner Austria, he rid the region of Protestantism by the turn of the century. And as governor, he believed he had to protect Catholicism from neighboring threats like the Ottoman Turks and the Uzbeks. The Uzbeks were war refugees fleeing from the Ottomans, who settled in Habsburg Croatia. They turned to piracy to make a living, attacking both Turkish and Christian ships. To fight the Uzbeks, Ferdinand made a deal with his cousin, King Philip III of Spain. In the secret Onate Treaty of July 1617, Philip agreed to help Ferdinand in the war and support his bid to be emperor, in return for full control of the Spanish road. The war, however, went badly for Ferdinand. The Venetians helped the Uzbeks, and Spain was busy with another war in northern Italy. Between 1617 and 1618, Ferdinand became king of Bohemia and Hungary. Bohemia had many Protestants and Hussites who feared Catholic rule. In 1609, Protestant nobles, led by Heinrich Matthias, the Count of Thurn, forced Emperor Rudolf to sign the Letter of Majesty, protecting Bohemia's religious freedom. Ferdinand promised to honor it, but his actions, such as allowing Catholics to keep land taken from Protestants, and even banning Protestantism in some towns, said otherwise. Many Europeans thought the next big war would come in 1621, when the 12 years truce would expire. Little did they know that war would come much sooner. Part 2. Peace Thrown Out the Window. In March 1618, the Bohemian estates met to protest Matthias and Ferdinand's actions. Matthias refused to change course and dismissed the meeting. When they gathered again in May, Ferdinand's Catholic regents tried to dismiss them too. The Count of Thurn argued that this broke the Letter of Majesty. Fearing arrest, he and his allies stormed Prague Castle on May 23, 1618. They threw Ferdinand's two regents, Slavata and Martinez, and their secretary out of a window. All three miraculously survived. The rebels set up their own government and raised an army. Thurn became commander, but leadership was divided, and men were hard to recruit. The rebels looked abroad for help, hinting at a kingly title to win support. They turned to Frederick V, the Elector Palatine, Gabriel Bethlen, the Prince of Transylvania, as well as Charles Emmanuel I, the Duke of Savoy. Charles Emmanuel sent 2,000 Swiss mercenaries under Peter Ernst, the Count of Mansfeld, to help the Bohemians. Mansfeld captured Pilsen in western Bohemia in the autumn. Earlier, Thurn led an army into Moravia and then marched on the Habsburg capital of Vienna in March 1619, hoping Protestants in the city would join him. Vienna held firm, and Thurn, lacking siege weapons, withdrew after a week. Back in Bohemia, Mansfeld suffered defeat at Sablat on June 10th. Many soldiers died, were captured, or even defected. The rebels' failure in Vienna and defeat in battle hurt their cause. But the war continued as both sides prepared for a larger conflict. While Vienna faced attack, Matthias died on March 20th, 1619. After victory at Sablat, Ferdinand felt safe enough to go to Frankfurt to elect the next Holy Roman Emperor. Frederick V of the Palatinate tried to block him, but John George, the Elector of Saxony, refused to support Frederick. On August 28th, the electors chose Ferdinand as emperor. Meanwhile, Bohemian leaders formed a confederation on July 31st. It joined Bohemia, Moravia, Silesia, and Lusatia under an elective monarchy with strong Protestant rights, a system similar to the Dutch Republic. On August 19th, they declared Frederick was not their true king and deposed him. They offered the crown to Frederick V. Even though Frederick was a prince who knew more about gardening than fighting, he was well connected and could bring lots of support for the Protestant cause. He accepted and entered Prague in October, welcomed by cheering crowds. Frederick soon realized his allies would not stand with him. The Protestant Union gave little help, and his father-in-law, King James I of England, stayed out of the war. His strongest supporter became Gabriel Bethlen, a fellow Reformed Protestant. In August 1619, Bethlen marched with 35,000 men towards Vienna to seize the Hungarian crown, but winter and disease forced him back. Ferdinand turned to Poland. His brother-in-law, King Sigismund III, sent Cossack horsemen to help. They defeated Bethlen's ally George Rákóczi at Humane in November 1619. Yet, Bethlen returned with help from the Ottomans, and by August 1620, his followers named him King of Hungary. Ferdinand was unable to fight a two-front war. The Habsburg monarchy had almost no money, as it owed 20 million florins but earned only 2.4 million each year. Rebellious provinces refused to pay taxes, and the army cost more than the empire could afford. Ferdinand needed allies. Duke Maximilian of Bavaria saw a chance to grow his power. In October 1619, he agreed to help Ferdinand if he gained land and rewards in return. He sent 25,000 soldiers under Johann Cerclas, the Count of Tilly, to help Ferdinand. Spanish troops also moved into the Rhineland to block Protestant armies. At the same time, France pushed for a truce between the Catholic League and Protestant Union. Tilly was free to strike Bohemia without worry. In 1620, Ferdinand began his offensive. The Bavarians and Catholic League swept through Upper Austria in weeks, forcing local rebels to give up. Spain invaded Frederick's land in the Palatinate, while Saxony grabbed Lusatia from the Bohemians. The main Bohemian army, led by Christian of Anhalt, fell apart from disease and mutiny. By autumn, Maximilian and Tilly marched toward Prague. On November 8, 1620, the two sides clashed outside the city at White Mountain. The Bohemians held a strong ridge, but their tired, unready troops broke almost at once. Within an hour, their cavalry fled, followed by the infantry. Prague fell almost without a fight, and Frederick fled the city the next day. By year's end, the Bohemian revolt was crushed entirely. After the Battle of White Mountain, Frederick fled north. Saxony, Denmark, and Britain told him to make peace, but he refused to give up. In 1621, Ferdinand declared Frederick and his allies outlaws and seized their lands. Frederick escaped to The Hague with his wife Elizabeth. The Protestant Union fell apart. By May 1621, the Union made peace with Spain and disbanded. This peace was well timed, as it freed up Spanish troops to go to war with the Dutch, as the 12 years truce expired a month earlier. In 1622, Bethlen made peace with Ferdinand, keeping land in modern-day Slovakia, but giving up the Hungarian crown. Ferdinand then focused on Frederick's lands, where Tilly had trouble capturing the Palatinate cities of Heidelberg, Mannheim, and Frankenthal. Encouraged by his fort's strong defenses, Frederick returned in April, joined by George Frederick of Baden-Durlach and Duke Christian of Brunswick. After Mansfield cavalry beat Tilly at Mingolsheim in April, the Catholics regrouped with Spanish forces under Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba, who went on to pummel the Protestants. At Wimpfen in May, George Frederick's army collapsed after a gunpowder explosion caused panic. At Hochst in June, Christian's men drowned when a bridge over the main river broke. The Protestant armies were shattered, and Mansfeld and Christian fled to join the Dutch and help relieve the siege of Bergen op Zoom. But Cordoba caught and crushed them at Fleurus in southern Belgium. Ambrosius Spinola lifted the siege of Bergen only when the Dutch resupplied it by sea. The Dutch paid Mansfield to guard East Frisia from Spanish raids, but his men ended up looting the land and causing misery. At the same time, King James of England ordered the English garrison in Frankenthal to surrender in March 1623. Later on, France's King Louis XIII secretly backed Mansfield to trouble Spain, and his army grew to more than 20,000, while Christian raised 21,000 men in North Saxony. Ferdinand offered pardons if they disbanded, but both refused. Tilly prepared to fight. In the summer of 1623, Christian marched west, looking for Dutch support, but Tilly chased him. On August 6th at Stadtlohn, near the Dutch border, Christian's entire army broke. 6,000 Protestants died, 4,000 were captured, and Tilly only lost 1,000. Christian escaped with few survivors. After Stadtlohn, Protestant resistance collapsed. Towns in Westphalia gave up en masse. Catholic town councils replaced Protestant ones, and plunder ruined the land. By early 1624, Christian dismissed his troops, and most of Mansfield's men entered the Dutch service. With the rebels crushed, Ferdinand rewarded his allies. Frederick was stripped of his titles, and Maximilian gained the Palatinate and his electoral vote in 1623 instead, despite protests. Ferdinand and Maximilian also forced re-Catholicization in Austria, Bohemia, and the Palatinate. Pastors were expelled, churches seized, towns and nobles ordered to convert or leave. Hundreds of thousands fled to Saxony, Württemberg, or Hungary. Frederick, still in exile, became a Protestant symbol, keeping the Bohemian and Palatinate cause alive, and opening the way for more foreign intervention in the war. Part 3. A Dane and a Bohemian. By 1623, most of Lower Saxony had avoided war, but worrying patterns began to emerge. That year, the bishopric of Osnabrück was forcibly returned to Catholic control after more than 50 years of Protestant rule. Local leaders feared Ferdinand might try to force the whole region back to Catholicism. The presence of Tilly's army in nearby Westphalia made those fears stronger. Help came from England. King James felt that the removal of his son-in-law Frederick from the Palatinate insulted his family's honor. James hoped to fix things through marriage, and sent his son Charles to Spain to propose to Infanta Maria Ana. If the marriage worked, Frederick might regain his lands. Unfortunately, the Spanish match failed, and James died in 1625, succeeded by Charles. Angry at Spain, he declared war on King Philip IV. England was too weak to beat Spain, but Protestant rulers in the empire saw this as a sign of support. One of these rulers was Christian IV, the King of Denmark and Norway, but also Duke of Holstein inside the Holy Roman Empire, which gave him the status of an imperial prince. He wanted to expand Danish trade in the Baltic Sea and secure church lands in Bremen, Verden, and Osnabrück for his sons. By 1623, he had already installed his son Frederick as Bishop of Verden. In 1625, Christian joined England and the Dutch Republic in a treaty at The Hague, promising him money and troops. Lower Saxony also named him their military commander. But English aid was late and small, and his German allies offered weak support. His position stayed uncertain. Ferdinand did not want the Lower Saxons to stay neutral, but he also feared a new war with Denmark. Tilly blocked King Christian's entry into Lower Saxony by taking key bridges at Höxter and Holzminden on the Weser River. Maximilian supported this move, since Christian looked like he was trying to form a new Protestant alliance. At the same time, Mansfeld and Christian of Brunswick joined the Danes in autumn. Their force was a mix of 12,000 recruits from Britain, Germany, France, and the Netherlands. Yet England and the Dutch soon cut their support, as they ran out of money after attacking the Spanish port of Cadiz. This weakness came just as a new figure appeared on the scene: Albrecht von Wallenstein. Born into a small Bohemian noble family, orphaned young and often sick, he became rich after marrying a wealthy widow who later died. He used her fortune to fund soldiers and buy large estates. He lent Ferdinand more than 1.6 million florins, which earned him the Duchy of Friesland in 1624, and a new wife. People said he was cold, proud, and ambitious, with rumors claiming he wanted a kingly title. But he had no heirs, and seemed more eager to secure power before his health gave out. In 1625, Wallenstein offered to raise an army for the empire. Ferdinand agreed and gave him a contract for 24,000 men. Though he first had only 16,000 trained soldiers, his numbers rose quickly. By 1626, Tilly had 35,000, while Wallenstein commanded almost 70,000. His plan was simple: build overwhelming strength to force King Christian into peace. Christian gathered 20,000 soldiers at Wolfenbüttel to block Wallenstein and Tilly from joining forces. Wallenstein had a similar-sized army at Halberstadt in the southeast, while Tilly stayed near the Weser River in the west. At the same time, danger came from Mansfeld, who marched 12,000 men along the Elbe River. Ferdinand ordered Wallenstein to stay west of the river, but Mansfeld struck at a key bridge at Dessau. threatening to cut supplies from Bohemia to the Imperial Army. On April 25th, 1626, Mansfeld attacked Wallenstein's defenses at Dessau. With only 7,000 men available, he was too weak. Wallenstein struck back with hidden troops and crushed him. Mansfeld's cavalry fled, leaving his infantry to surrender. Still, supply problems and rivalry kept Wallenstein and Tilly away from exploiting the victory. After this, they planned to invade Lower Saxony, but unrest in Austria slowed them down. In Upper Austria, harsh attempts to force the Catholic faith caused 40,000 peasants to revolt. They destroyed an imperial force sent in May, but after the leaders died, their army collapsed. Bavaria's Gottfried Heinrich, the Count of Pappenheim, crushed the revolt. Meanwhile, Christians stayed quiet, hoping Saxony's John George could bring peace. But Wallenstein's victory at Dessau made Brandenburg and others lean toward Ferdinand. Mansfeld, refusing to give up, raised 10,000 men, joined 7,000 Danes, and marched through Silesia into Hungary, hoping to bring Gabriel Bethlen back into the fight. Wallenstein followed with 20,000 troops, while Tilly guarded their base back home. Tilly worked to strengthen his position by taking 3 Protestant towns in North Saxony and Hessen-Kassel. He captured Munden in July 1626, where soldiers killed and looted most of the town's 2,500 civilians. At Göttingen, he used miners to drain the defenses, and after 7 weeks, the town gave up on August 11th. Christian tried to hold Northeim, but Imperial troops forced him to retreat on the 25th. Christian wanted to regroup at Wolfenbüttel, but his supply wagons got stuck at Lutter. With 20,000 men and strong artillery, he chose to stand and fight. On August 27th, some of his troops attacked too early, while he stayed behind. Tilly's army struck from the flanks and captured the Danish guns. The Danish line collapsed, and the King's Guards covered the retreat. Christian lost 7,000 men, and much of his supplies. Tilly lost only 700. As the Danes fell back to Verdun, they burned villages. Tilly's army marched through Brandenburg to pressure its elector, George William, into supporting Maximilian, but hunger and fatigue broke their strength. Many captured Danish soldiers returned to Christian after he paid them. By winter, some of Tilly's cavalry was turning to robbery to survive. Meanwhile, Mansfeld led his army into Upper Hungary. Locals hid their food, and help from Bethlen came too late. Mansfeld's men starved and deserted. He left with a small guard trying to escape to Venice, but died near Sarajevo in December 1626. That month, Bethlen made peace with Ferdinand, but later died in 1629. Transylvania fell into turmoil until George Rákóczi restored order in 1636. In 1626, Tilly started a new campaign near the Elbe River. He tricked Christian by pretending to attack Ronberg, then crossed the river upstream at Blockade. When Wallenstein joined Tilly in September, they overran Holstein within weeks. Before long, the whole Jutland Peninsula lay open to attack. Many nobles deserted Christian, peasants resisted him, and his soldiers had to retreat to the Danish islands. Ferdinand rewarded Wallenstein for this victory, He owed Wallenstein 4.75 million florins, but could not pay. So instead, he gave him the Duchy of Mecklenburg on the Baltic Sea, deposing the previous duke. This shocked other princes. Many feared Ferdinand would take more lands from princes, as he had already done to Frederick. Wallenstein's rise to power proved the emperor could break tradition and revoke and hand out land as he pleased. Meanwhile, Christian still controlled the Danish islands. He used his navy to rid the empire's coast, and rebuilt his army to 20,000 men. But when he tried to attack the mainland, Christian faltered. At Wolgast in 1628, he suffered defeat, and Wallenstein trapped his forces again. Even in 1629, when Christian returned with more men, he faced the same danger. At last, Christian made peace at Lubeck in May 1629. He gave up the mainland, but kept the islands. Ferdinand decided to give them back soon after, hoping to gain Christian as an ally against Sweden. The treaty ended Denmark's intervention in the war and weakened the Protestant cause, though the Danish people eagerly welcomed the peace. Interlude: Europe on fire. When Duke Vincenzo II Gonzaga died in December 1627, the duchies of Mantua and Montferrat were left without an heir. His lands lay on the Po River near the Spanish Duchy of Milan. With no male heir, Vincenzo's French cousin, Duke Charles of Nevers, claimed the duchy. This alarmed Philip IV, Ferdinand, and Louis XIII alike, since none of them wanted a new war in Italy. Spain's governor in Milan, Gonzalo Fernandez de Cordoba, struck a secret deal with Duke Charles Emmanuel of Savoy to split Montferrat. By 1629, both Spanish and Imperial armies invaded northern Italy. They besieged Mantua, while Ambrogio Spinola led a siege on the fort of Casale in Montferrat. Mantua resisted, but soon fell to plague and hunger. In July 1630, Imperial forces stormed the city, killing thousands and looting its treasures. At the same time, France's chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, invaded Savoy, but sickness ruined his army. Louis XIII fell ill, and Richelieu almost lost power in Paris during the Day of the Dupes, but luckily, his career survived the confusion. Peace talks at Regensburg gave Charles of Nevers the duchy, but favored the Habsburgs. Richelieu rejected it. By 1631, Spinola was dead. Plague had wasted away Habsburg forces, and scary developments in the war in Germany pulled troops away. A final peace at Cherasco confirmed Charles as Duke of Mantua and Montferrat. Spain, having spent vast sums, came away with little. Ferdinand's authority in Italy survived, but his relationship with his cousin Philip IV grew weaker. The fact that Spain spent more than it earned from the Mantuan War did not help that it was already hemorrhaging money. The capture of the Dutch city of Breda in 1625 looked like a victory, but the costs drained Spain more than it hurt the Dutch. Starting in 1621, taxes doubled, and borrowing increased fivefold. Even cuts at Philip's court could not stop war costs from rising. By 1627, bankruptcy was declared. The Dutch, in contrast, grew stronger. When Prince Maurice of Nassau died in 1625, his brother Frederick Henry took over. Unlike Spain, he had plenty of money. Richelieu gave the Dutch money in the 1624 Treaty of Compiègne, which funded a larger army and navy. By 1629, they commanded 70,000 soldiers, 50,000 militia, and a skilled fleet led by Piet Hein. Hein had long fought at sea. In 1628, with 31 ships, he attacked Spain's treasure fleet near Cuba, capturing over 11 million florins worth of loot. Spain was shaken. Treasure fleets now delayed sailing and risked hurricanes to avoid Dutch privateers. In 1631, one fleet wrecked near Yucatan, losing another 11 million florins. Another sank soon after. Plague, famine, drought, and Philip's illness deepened Spain's crisis. Using Hein's loot, Frederick Henry built a massive army. He besieged Saher-Gottenbosch in April 1629, breaking through its marshes and strong walls. After 5 months, the city fell. Spanish outposts fled, and Spain was forced to pull back from much of Germany. By 1630, both sides sought talks, though no peace yet came. Meanwhile, much like the Danish, the Swedish kings of the House of Vasa wanted control of the Baltic Sea and its lucrative trade for themselves. John III ruled Sweden from 1569, while his younger brother Sigismund III became king of Poland-Lithuania in 1587. John was Lutheran, Sigismund was Catholic, and the differences between their countries' religions led to war. After John died in 1592, Sigismund briefly ruled both Sweden and Poland, but their brother Charles IX deposed him in 1599. Charles IX died in 1611, and his son Gustavus Adolphus became king. In 1617, he forced Russia to give up land on the Baltic in Ingria and Karelia. Soon, he attacked his cousin Sigismund. Though Gustavus Adolphus could land troops, disease, distance, and tough Polish cavalry slowed them. Still, Gustavus took Riga in 1621, secured Livonia, and by 1626 entered Polish Prussia to control trade near Danzig, one of the most wealthiest ports in Europe. Danzig resisted, however, and by 1627 the war stalled. At the same time, Wallenstein was crushing Denmark and entered Pomerania. He dreamed of building a fleet to rule the Baltic, helped by Spanish money and ships. He tried to force the port of Stralsund to accept his authority, but with Danish and Swedish aid, the city held out. In 1628, Gustavus made Stralsund a Swedish base. After a Swedish defeat at Trisgana in 1629, the Truce of Altmark gave Sweden Livonia and most of Prussia's ports except Danzig, Königsberg, and Puck. Gustavus could now turn his full attention to the war in Germany. Part 4. Lion of the North. With the Danes reeling in early 1629, and the Protestant cause in the Holy Roman Empire looking dour, Ferdinand felt it was safe to issue the Edict of Restitution in March. This edict ordered Protestants to give back Catholic lands taken since 1552. It demanded the return of 2 archbishoprics, 13 bishoprics, and more than 500 monasteries, redrawing the map of much of the empire. Generals Wallenstein and Tilly were prepared to enforce it. The edict shocked many. Moderate Catholics worried it went too far, while Spain feared it would spark more war, something they desperately wanted to avoid. Even Pope Urban VIII only gave partial support, since the edict clashed with the earlier 1555 Peace of Augsburg. Carrying out the edict was messy. Many monasteries no longer existed, and Catholic groups fought among themselves over who would get the land. In some towns, there were too few Catholic priests and monks to replace Protestant clergy, so recatholicization was ineffective. The edict ultimately backfired on Ferdinand. It alienated moderate Lutherans and Catholics, gave strength to Catholic extremists, and broke trust across the empire. Meanwhile, tensions grew with Wallenstein. People distrusted his ambition, his distance from court, and his failure to pay his large army. His enemies forced Ferdinand to dismiss him in August 1630. Though command of the Imperial and Catholic League armies fell to Tilly, the Catholics were still unprepared when Gustavus Adolphus landed at Usedom in Pomerania in July, with 29,000 soldiers in tow. Before looking at Gustavus Adolphus' future campaigns, we must explore how he built up Sweden's strength. Gustavus, a fiery and bold soldier, worked side by side with Axel Oxenstierna, a calm and thoughtful nobleman. Gustavus often lived in camp, trained his soldiers, tested new weapons, and shared their hardships. He was a devout Lutheran, but he also did not mind using religion as a tool in politics. Oxenstierna, on the other hand, was serious and methodical. Though blunt and sometimes arrogant, he organized the government with great skill. Sweden itself was poor and thinly populated. Cold weather and little farmland gave it weak foundations. Yet Gustavus and Oxenstierna saw potential. From 1617, they reformed the state into 5 departments: justice, treasury, chancellery, admiralty, and army. Taxes were updated based on a new census. Better record keeping was adopted, and more iron and copper was produced and traded. The extra income went toward building a larger navy and army, with 31 warships by 1630. The army relied on conscription. Each region supplied men to regiments named after their provinces. The government ordered 1 in 10 men between the ages of 18 and 40 into military service. Parish priests tracked births, marriages, and deaths to keep a record of future soldiers to pull from. Gustavus also copied Dutch tactics. Inspired by the military reforms of Maurice of Nassau, Gustavus used smaller, faster units, with training encouraging close teamwork and unbreakable discipline. One major innovation was the use of small 3-pounder bronze cannons. They were easier to move and operate during battle compared to heavier guns in other European armies, giving the Swedes a sharp, mobile edge over their opponents in battle. After landing in Pomerania in July 1630, Gustavus had a rough start. Many German Protestant rulers distrusted Gustavus and chose to stay neutral. At a meeting in Leipzig in February 1631, they agreed to raise an army of 40,000, not for a religious war, but to defend their rights and liberties. The city of Magdeburg on the Elbe River became a turning point. Its archbishop had declared for Sweden early on. By spring 1631, Imperial commanders Tilly and Pappenheim surrounded the city with 25,000 men. Gustavus captured and sacked towns near the Oder River, but could not break through. On May 20th, 1631, Tilly launched his assault. The fighting quickly devolved into horrific massacre and looting, with raging fires illuminating the carnage. When everything had been given out and there was nothing left to give, one Magdeburg survivor retold, then the misery really began. For then the soldiers began to beat, frighten, and threaten to shoot, skewer, hang, etc. the people, so that even if something had been buried under the earth or locked away behind 1,000 locks, the citizens would still have been forced to seek it out and hand it over. Much to the horror of Europe, the sack of Magdeburg saw around 20,000 people, soldiers and civilians, die, and one of the Empire's most prosperous cities destroyed. In June, Brandenburg gave in when Gustavus brought 26,000 men to Berlin. When Tilly invaded Saxony in September, Elector John George abandoned his neutrality and joined Gustavus. On September 7th, both sides met at Breitenfeld, outside of Leipzig. The Saxon army fled early on, but Gustavus' Swedes fought hard. His cavalry repelled an imperial charge, and General Gustav Horn counterattacked. By evening, the imperial army collapsed. Over 7,000 Imperials died, while the Swedes lost around 2,100. Breitenfeld became the first great Protestant victory of the war, proving that Augustus was the true defender of Protestant Germany. Meanwhile, Cardinal Richelieu wanted Gustavus as an ally. Even though France and the Habsburgs were both Catholic, they were bitter enemies. Spain surrounded France on land and blocked French growth in Europe. Richelieu first tried to win over Maximilian of Bavaria to act as a counterweight to the Habsburgs, but Maximilian stayed loyal to Ferdinand. So, Richelieu turned to Sweden. In January 1631, Sweden and France signed the Treaty of Bärwald. Sweden promised not to fight Bavaria or make peace without France. In return, France subsidized Sweden with $400,000 each year. In May, Richelieu also signed a treaty with Maximilian, promising to defend Bavaria, even against Sweden. Both knew this deal could not surely hold, but it kept relations friendly. After the Swedish victory at Breitenfeld, Gustavus marched west to the Rhine River before invading Bavaria. In 1632, he entered Nuremberg, crossed the Lech River near Donauwörth under heavy fire, and defeated Tilly, who later died of his wounds. Gustavus took Augsburg and Munich afterwards, and Maximilian fled. Ferdinand recalled Wallenstein out of desperation, who raised an army of 65,000. Wallenstein ousted Saxon forces invading Bohemia, and to help reinforce them, Gustavus marched north to Nuremberg, where he tried but failed to defeat Wallenstein at Alta Vista in September. Afterwards, he invaded Saxony, and Gustavus chased him again. On November 16th, 1632, at Lutzen, Gustavus led a confused cavalry charge, one blinded by fog and smoke, and was killed. His men nearly broke, but Bernard of Saxe-Weimar rallied them, and the Swedes forced Wallenstein to retreat by the end of the day. Gustavus was survived by a 6-year-old daughter, Christina. His wife, Maria Eleonora, grieved so heavily that she locked Christina away and visited Gustavus' coffin every day. Axel Oxenstierna was forced to remove Maria Eleonora from power and take charge. He placed Christina under a council until she became queen in 1644. Oxenstierna's most challenging task was maintaining the loyalty of the army. Many officers were owed money, and some even thought of leaving. To retain them, Oxenstierna helped make the Hillebrand League in 1633, uniting partisan princes across southern Germany. They agreed to pay for a joint army led by Sweden. Still, Swedish officers mutinied that spring, forcing Oxenstierna to reward them with captured towns and monasteries in the empire. John George joined a spring campaign in 1633, sending the Count of Thurn to invade Silesia. Wallenstein struck back in October at Steinau, allowing him to invade Lusatia and Brandenburg. But by this point in the war, virtually everyone agreed, including Ferdinand II, that Wallenstein was too powerful for his own good. On February 25, 1634, assassins killed him at Scheb. Meanwhile, Richelieu moved in to threaten the Spanish road, giving protection to rulers in Trier, Cologne, and Lorraine. This angered Spain, which took Brissac and secured Alsace by 1634. That same year, Philip IV's brother, Cardinal Infante Ferdinand, joined Ferdinand II's son, Ferdinand of Hungary, at Nordlingen. On December 6th, after repeated field assaults on Spanish positions, the Swedish army collapsed. 8,000 men died, 4,000 were captured, and all of the artillery lost. Partisan hopes in Germany had never looked more grim. Part 5. The War Feeds Itself. Even with Catholic triumph at Nordlingen, peace in the Holy Roman Empire was still made impossible by the Edict of Restitution. Ferdinand of Hungary advised his father, Emperor Ferdinand II, that the edict caused more war than it was worth. In late 1634, they chose compromise. After Nordlingen, John George and other Protestant rulers in Germany signed the Peace of Prague. Protestants received pardons, except exiled Bohemians and Frederick V's family. Lutherans could keep the lands they held since 1627, which ended the edict but let Catholics keep earlier gains. Saxony kept Lusatia from Bohemia, and in return, John George abandoned his Swedish ally, which tied him to the Emperor and turned Sweden into his foe. The Hillebrand League broke apart, while Richelieu rushed to fund any German princes still willing to resist Ferdinand. Meanwhile, the Dutch faced pressure too. Earlier, they had sought peace with Spain, but after Nordlingen, Frederick Henry saw no choice but to renew war. He offered France a plan to divide the Spanish Netherlands, Wallonia to France, the rest to the Dutch. Many in the Netherlands opposed giving so much to France, but leaders felt they had no other option. In 1635, France and the Dutch formed an alliance against Spain, but did not officially go to war. But when Spanish troops seized Trier and kidnapped its archbishop in March 1635, who had put himself under French protection, France saw it as an insult. On May 19, 1635, King Louis XIII declared war on Spain. France was not ready when Louis declared war. Richelieu needed 150,000 soldiers to guard their long border with Spain, but had only 49,000 available. The army itself was in poor condition, as France had not fought a major war in over 40 years. As the Count of Guiche observed, the opening of the campaign and everything appeared difficult to the troops, and even to the officers, who had lived so softly for too long. The cavalry was not used to pitching camp, and did it clumsily. Richelieu's only strong commander was Henry II, the Duke of Rohan, who had once led Protestant rebels against France in the 1620s. Because of this weakness, France lost ground quickly. The Imperial Army captured Kaiserslautern, Heidelberg, and Mainz in the Rhineland. In 1636, France's troubles grew worse. Spanish forces under their Cardinal Infante invaded Picardy, burning villages and reaching Corbie, only 80 miles north of Paris. At the same time, Imperial forces invaded Burgundy from the French Comté. Yet, French defenders stopped them at Saint-Jean-de-Lens, and that same month, the French retook Corbie. Sweden also suffered. Many wanted peace, but Oxenstierna instead renewed their alliance with France in the Treaty of Wismar, repeating the earlier Treaty of Barwald. In 1636, Swedish General Johan Banner retook Magdeburg, but soon had to retreat before an Imperial and Saxon army. Banner rallied, and on October 4th, at Wittstock, he attacked. Despite heavy losses, Swedish cavalry broke the enemy's right, forcing Imperial troops to retreat and abandon their guns. By the Peace of Prague, Ferdinand II was 57 years old and wanted to secure the throne for his son, Ferdinand of Hungary. Saxony and Brandenburg supported him, but Bavaria, Cologne, and Mainz demanded peace talks before agreeing. Ferdinand promised such talks, but he died before they could happen on February 15, 1637. Ferdinand of Hungary then became Emperor Ferdinand III. In 1638, France fought to sever the Spanish road. After his defeat at Nordlingen, Bernard of Saxe-Weimar agreed to enter French service in exchange for pay and land in Alsace, which the Spanish road ran through. In February, Bernard failed to take Rheinfelden near Basel. He tried again in March, captured 2 Imperial commanders, and forced the town to surrender. Still short of soldiers, he received French reinforcements from Henry, the Viscount of Turenne, to keep up his momentum. That June, Bernard began a siege of Brissac, a strong fortress that guarded the Spanish road. Imperial forces failed to break the siege, and French victory at nearby Wittenweier in August stopped further relief. The defenders were starved into surrendering on December 19th. France now controlled Alsace, though Bernard and Richelieu clashed over who ruled it. Their dispute ended when Bernard died in 1639. With Brissac lost, Spain could now only supply troops in the Netherlands by sea. In October 1639, Spanish Admiral Antonio de Oquendo led a fleet to bring supplies to Dunkirk, but Dutch Admiral Martin Tromp attacked near Dover. Using artillery and fire ships, Tromp destroyed around 30 Spanish vessels. Though Philip IV was quick to order the construction of new ships, Spain's defeat at the Battle of the Downs proved that war, especially against the Dutch Republic, was untenable. Spain's issues worsened in 1640. When war with France began in 1635, bloody battles along the Pyrenees Mountains also began. Spanish soldiers suffered heavy losses, though they did break the French siege of Salcès in Catalonia in January 1640. To prepare for new campaigns, Philip IV's advisor, the Count Duke of Olivares, forced 9,000 Castilian soldiers into Catalan homes. This angered locals, who saw it as an attack on their rights. The unpaid Castilians often stole food and supplies from the Catalans too, which fueled hatred of Catalonia's corrupt aristocracy. On June 4th, during a Corpus Christi festival, rebels disguised as farmers stormed Barcelona. They drove out the viceroy and killed him on the beach as he tried to escape. Many Catalans supported the rebels and asked France for help. In January 1641, they accepted Louis XIII as their ruler. Soon after, Catalan and French forces defeated Spain at Montjuic near Barcelona. At the same time, Portugal also rose against Spanish control. Ever since Spain had inherited the throne in 1580, Portugal had lost its independence and faced heavy taxes. Lucrative trade profits that should have gone to Portugal went mostly to Spain instead, while they watched as the Dutch invaded their overseas empire. On December 1st, 1640, rebels in Lisbon seized the royal palace and declared the Duke of Braganza as King John IV. With Spain now stretched thin on 4 fronts in Europe, Olivares observed that this year can certainly be considered the worst this monarchy has ever experienced. After Johann Banner died in May 1641, his poorly disciplined army rebelled. Oxenstierna sent Leonard Torstensson, a skilled commander, to take charge. He arrived in November with 7,000 fresh soldiers and quickly restored order. In 1642, Torstensson marched into Moravia and captured the city of Olmütz in June. He built strong defenses there, turning it into Sweden's main base in the east. Vienna was now in danger, so Emperor Ferdinand III raised a huge army. Torstensson pulled back through Silesia and then attacked Leipzig. On November 2nd, the Imperial Army cornered him near Breitenfeld. Though outnumbered, he struck their left flank, broke their lines, and crushed them. The Imperials lost 10,000 men, while Sweden lost 4,000. Leipzig soon surrendered. Elsewhere, Spain faced change. In late 1641, the Cardinal Infante died of smallpox at age 39, leaving a Portuguese noble, Francisco de Melo, in command of the experienced Army of Flanders. In 1642, he defeated French forces at Honnecourt, then marched into France with 25,000 men and besieged Rocroi, a town on the road to Champagne. On May 19, 1643, the French army appeared under Louis de Bourbon, the Duke of Enghien. Louis XIII was supposed to lead this army, but tuberculosis had claimed his life 4 days earlier, and was succeeded by his 4-year-old son, Louis XIV. At Rocroi, Enghien disciplined troops made quick work of the Spanish veterans. Spain lost over 10,000 men, France only 2,000. The Battle of Rocroi shattered the legend of Spanish invulnerability and military superiority that they had tried to uphold for the past century. The victory was interpreted in France as a sign of good things to come under the young Sun King. Part 6 Westphalian Reality. The year 1638 marked the war's 20th anniversary. Both sides longed for an end to the chaos, and in 1640, imperial princes and their delegates met at Regensburg. Ferdinand III agreed to cancel the harsh edicts of restitution, and said peace should follow the earlier Peace of Prague. But Swedish pamphlets warned that Ferdinand only wanted more power, not an end to the war. The princes grew weary, and talks collapsed. One such prince was Elector Frederick William of Brandenburg. Frederick William had seen his lands ruined by decades of war. He felt the Peace of Prague gave no relief, so he refused it and made a truce with Sweden, exiting the war. At the same time, Sweden, France, and the Imperialists met in Hamburg. On December 25, 1641, they agreed to a peace congress. France would meet Ferdinand in Munster, while Sweden would meet him in Osnabrück, two neutral towns in Westphalia. Spain and the Dutch Republic later joined the Congress. The first talks were set for 1642, but delayed until 1643. France also faced change at home. Cardinal Richelieu had died in December 1642. His role passed to Cardinal Mazarin, who worked with Queen Anne of Austria, the mother and regent for young King Louis XIV. After France's victory at Rocroi, they pushed east to hold the Rhine. In November 1643, they seized Rottweil, but soon after, at Tuttlingen, Bavarian General Franz von Mercy ambushed them. The French fled across the Rhine, lost Rottweil, and their veteran army was destroyed. In 1643, Oxenstierna told General Torstenson to attack Denmark by surprise. The main dispute centered on tolls for ships passing through the Danish Sound. King Christian refused to let ships from Swedish ports go toll-free, so Torstenson marched with 16,000 soldiers to straighten him out. By early 1644, Torstenson held most of Jutland. A rich Dutch merchant gave Sweden money for a fleet, which helped capture Gotland and Åsel in the Baltic. Another Swedish army under Gustaf Horn attacked Skane, taking Helsingborg and besieging Malmö, while a smaller force invaded Norway. But the seas did not freeze that winter, stopping Torstenson from crossing deeper into Denmark. Horn faced strong resistance at Malmö, and Imperial forces shadowed Torstenson without a fight. To win, Sweden needed control of the sea. In May 1644, Christian beat the Dutch allies of Sweden in a naval battle at Lister Deep. In July, his fleet fought the Swedes at Kiel Bay. Heavy cannon fire ruled the battle. Christian lost an ear and an eye, but still won. Yet in October, Swedish Admiral Carl Gustaf Wrangel struck back, obliterating the Dutch fleet at Fehmarn. With money gone and morale broken, Denmark fell. By 1645, Sweden also seized Bremen and Verden. At Brömsebro, peace was signed. Sweden gained Gotland, Åsel, Jämtland, Härjedalen, and a 30-year lease on Holland. Denmark's foreign influence was ruined, allowing Sweden to enter the talks in Westphalia with stronger demands and a better ability to enforce them. After France lost at Tuttlingen, Henry, the Viscount of Turenne, took command of the French army in Germany. The Swedes were busy fighting Denmark, so Maximilian of Bavaria saw a chance to knock the French down a peg. In spring 1644, Maximilian sent Franz von Mercy with troops across the Black Forest, opposite of Alsace. They took control of land along the Rhine and captured Oberlinken in May. In June, they surrounded Freiburg. Turenne had too few men, and Freiburg fell in July. French reinforcements under the young Duke of Enghien came too late, but he attacked in August anyways. Both sides lost about half their men, around 7,500 each. French cavalry finally forced Mercy to retreat, though Bavaria still held Freiburg. In 1645, Torstenson turned back to Bohemia while peace talks with Denmark were underway. At Jankow in March, they faced Ferdinand's army. The Swedes took the high ground, crushed the Imperial cavalry, and killed or captured half the enemy force. The road to Vienna lay open, but instead Torstenson attacked Brno. The city resisted for 5 months, giving Ferdinand time to recover. In August, John George joined Frederick William in quitting the war and making peace with Sweden. France continued to perform badly. Turenne lost most of his army by the hands of Franz von Mercy at the Battle of Marienthal in May. Reinforcements under Enghien helped win the Second Battle of Dorlingen in August, where von Mercy was killed, but French losses were so heavy that Bavaria soon regained much of its land. To start the 1646 campaign, Torstenson wanted to join forces with the French army under Turenne. Cardinal Mazarin disagreed, as he needed Turenne's men to fight Spain. But Turenne sided with Torstenson and wanted to defeat Ferdinand. Turenne crossed the Rhine with 8,000 soldiers, and joined Carl Gustav Wrangel's larger Swedish army. Together, they invaded Bavaria. Bavaria's fortresses had too few defenders and fell quickly. Maximilian fled Munich and made peace with France with the Treaty of Ulm in March 1647. Other German princes, like Mainz and Trier, also abandoned Ferdinand, leaving the Habsburgs increasingly isolated. Spain itself was collapsing under revolts. Heavy taxes, famine, and debt caused a revolt in Naples in 1647. Crowds attacked nobles and set up their own Neapolitan republic. France sent Henry II, the Duke of Guise, to help, but poor planning and mistrust doomed the mission, allowing Spain to retake Naples in 1648. But, since there were still revolts in Catalonia and Portugal, war with France having no end in sight, and Spanish finances succumbing to a second bankruptcy in 1647, the end of the Neapolitan revolt was a drop in the bucket of Philip IV's issues. The Treaty of Ulm soon fell through. France pulled Turenne north to fight Spain in the Low Countries, weakening their front in Germany. The Swedes kept fighting, taking towns in Bohemia before being ambushed at Treble, which pushed Maximilian back into Ferdinand's arms. In May 1648, Turenne and Wrangel struck again, crushing the Imperial army at Zusmarshausen and ravaging Bavaria. A detachment of Wrangel's troops then marched on Prague in October, seizing its castle and its many valuable treasures. The fierce fighting in the city only ended when news of the Peace of Westphalia arrived in November. For 30 years, Europe fought one of its longest and most brutal wars. Countless delegates from both sides had been meeting in Munster and Osnabrück for years, hard at work talking, compromising, and crafting a definitive peace to end this war. At last, on October 24th, 1648, they signed the Peace of Westphalia. The peace reshaped the Holy Roman Empire. Its hundreds of small states could now govern themselves without the emperor's interference, a concept today known as Westphalian sovereignty. Religion also became more open compared to the 1555 Peace of Augsburg. Rulers still chose the official faith of their land, but their people could worship any faith privately. Reformed Protestants, along with Catholics and Lutherans, gained legal rights. Lands taken from the Catholic Church before 1624 stayed with their holders. Territory changed hands across the empire. Bavaria kept the Upper Palatinate, as well as the electoral vote. Charles Louis, son of the late Frederick V, regained the Lower Palatinate. Brandenburg kept its land in western Germany and secured eastern Pomerania, some bishoprics, and future inheritance rights to Magdeburg. France and Sweden grew stronger. France regained much of Alsace, Metz, Toul, Verdun, and parts of Lorraine, securing power west of the Rhine. Sweden gained western Pomerania, as well as Bremen and Verden, giving it powerful influence over Baltic trade. The Dutch Republic also won full independence from Spain and the Empire after 80 years of war. They kept their overseas gains and gained trade rights in Asia and the Americas. Not everyone welcomed the peace. Pope Innocent X famously declared the Peace of Westphalia to be dull, void, invalid, iniquitous, unjust, damnable, reprobate, inane, empty of meaning and effect for all time. Yet, most rulers in the empire had grown too weary to continue fighting. After 30 years of bloodshed, they agreed to peace, not from conviction, but from pure exhaustion. When the 30 Years' War finally ended, Europe had lost between 5 and 8 million people, including both soldiers and civilians. No part of Germany escaped the destruction. Invading armies brought death, famine, and disease wherever they went. Plague, typhus, influenza, and dysentery spread quickly across Germany. Many leaders also often adopted a policy of bellum se ipsum, the war feeds itself, allowing their armies to ravage and pillage innocent villages, towns, and farmland to find food, supplies, and pay. The war left Germany divided. The emperor lost most of his power, and local princes ruled their lands freely. Before long, Bavaria, Saxony, and Brandenburg Prussia began aiming for kingly titles, or at least more power, enough to rival the emperor by themselves. The Austrian Habsburgs began to focus more on their own lands in Austria, Bohemia, and Hungary, going on to battle the Ottoman Turk to secure them. The Spanish Habsburgs fared far worse. Though the Peace of Westphalia ended its war with the Dutch, their war with France was not yet over. In 1658, French and English forces beat Spain at the Battle of the Dunes. The Treaty of the Pyrenees in 1659 gave France northern Catalonia, Dunkirk to England, and arranged a marriage between Louis XIV and the Spanish princess Maria Theresa. Portugal, with help from England, gained independence in 1668. Spain was officially in decline, a situation personified by Philip IV's sickly son and inbred successor, Charles II. When Charles II died in 1700, Europe went to war again, and Spain was consumed by more destruction. Sweden gained power from the war, but faced serious problems. Nobles had taken land and money meant for the crown, leaving the country nearly bankrupt. Queen Christina gave up the throne in 1654, and Charles X took over. He fought wars in Poland, Denmark, and against rebels. Sweden had a large empire, but too few resources to defend it from its neighbors. Instead of defense, Sweden's kings decided to invest in offense instead. So when Sweden's neighbors, Denmark, Poland, and Russia, did try to attack in 1700, they were in for a valuable lesson. France emerged as the biggest victor of the war. After the Peace of Westphalia, the kingdom faced a civil war called the Fronde. Queen Anne of Austria and Mazarin carefully managed the crisis and restored order. By 1653, King Louis XIV was ready to rule alone. Over the course of his reign, Louis centralized the authority of the monarchy, reducing the influence of the French nobility and regional judicial courts. He built one of the largest and most professional armies in all of Europe, and increased state revenue to pay for it all. If the 16th century belonged to Spain, the 17th century belonged to the Sun King.